He united the people as one and became the king of the world, the sole inspiration for a tower that reached the heavens. He became a mighty hunter before the Lord, worshipped, adored, rejected. Was there really angelic blood in his DNA? Were there really supernatural properties in the garments stolen from Noah? How did such a mighty king fall from a kingdom that reached even to the stars? Welcome back to another episode of Ancient Echoes. I hope you all had a happy Father's Day, a happy Juneteenth, whatever it is you're celebrating, man. I hope you enjoyed it. Tonight, my name is Bronson Long. My brother's name is Austin. And we are going to be going over Mr. Nimrod, the king of the earth, the empire of Babylon. Going over Genesis 10, and so many theories and mysteries surround this character, man. And Austin has set up an incredible study for us to go through tonight. So without further ado, Austin, man, how are you doing tonight, bro?
I am doing fantastic. Welcome to everybody. We're going to be getting into it tonight. This is one of the most controversial, prominent people in history. We're talking about the Dark Lord himself, Nimrod. And there's all kinds of opinions on it, and we're going to be diving into all of them. And to give a good encompassing view of who this person is and what he did, where he went to, how he passed away, and let's get into it, man. We got a whole lot to cover tonight, so let's just dive right in.
I'm ready for it, bro. All right, screen share's up. We're going to do, as you guys know, we always start every episode in the Bible. And if you are new to this channel, man, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We put out content twice a week. Where we do a Genesis commentary, and then we do little special episodes like this, where we take a look into some of the deeper, different type of subjects that you don't always get the time to on your own or even in a church community. So hang out with us twice a week, man, and we always have a good time here. So tonight we're starting up in Genesis chapter 10. We're going to start in verse 8, and it reads, "And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. And he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar." So that is our narrative we get in the Bible right off the bat with our man named Nimrod. If you've been watching our last couple episodes, which I highly suggest you go back and take a look at, Austin and I have been going through what is known as the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, where we see all the sons of Noah getting off of the ark and spreading out to populate the entire earth after this major flood that wipes out everybody. And for some reason in this chapter, Nimrod is the only person who seems to have any type of extra details added to his life. And tonight we're going to be discussing why the Bible chose to do that, what it means to be a mighty one in the earth, and how he became a mighty hunter before the Lord. So, all right, man. Austin, take it away, bro. What you got planned for us?
All right, brother. Well, this is Nimrod. He is the grandson he's the son of Cush, and he's the grandson of Ham. And this is very interesting because we've been going through Genesis 10, and Bronson, I believe this is our third episode now covering topics from this chapter. A lot of people don't like the genealogies and if so-and-so begat and so-and-so begat and so-and-so begat, but there is so much here. Like, we're on our third episode, and I think we have two more episodes. We have the Canaanites coming after this, and then we're going to do a whole one on the line of Shem. There's so much here, and there's so many fascinating things and historical references, and it's just so fascinating. But speaking of Nimrod, is the only one that they call out like this and have this whole section on where it talks about his kingdom. So he's very, very important in the ancient world, coming out of the line of Ham. So let's go ahead and go to this first clip. And this is just a kind of a short, just to give us a quick introduction.
All right.
Perfect.
Quick
man.
sound check for me, if you don't mind. Sound check on this.
No, no sound.
Thank you. Let's fix that real quick. Ain't no thing but a chicken wing. We'll get that figured out.
Most conspiratorial figures in history. The figure was mentioned in the Bible as the great-grandson of Noah. He possessed great strength and was called a mighty hunter before the Lord. Nimrod would abuse his strength and bully people into submission. Eventually, he would try to build the Tower of Babel with his kingdom to reach heaven as a rebellion against God. This would lead to God changing the languages of man to confuse them so they could not complete this goal. The Tower of Babel and the rulership of Nimrod would be understood by many as the first one-world order.
Yes. Awesome. So if you are new, sorry, go ahead, bro.
Now, I do want to say this: you guys are going to hear a lot about the Tower of Babel tonight. This is not the Tower of Babel episode. That will be coming on here in a couple episodes. We're going to be covering that in depth, but we will definitely be getting to that further. So don't think we're just going to skip over the Tower of Babel. We're going to do a big deep dive on that. So you're going to hear it in passing a lot, and we're going to read about some here. But just know that, hey, we're going to go back and go super deep on the Tower of Babel, go over all the different references to it in cultures around the world. There's a lot there. So just know we're going to come back and hit that. Now, it said that he had super strength. Bronson, do you have any theories about where that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, I got a few, man. It's we got some text coming up real soon on where that comes from, man. When that video says that this was the first one world order, I think it's very important to segue what you just said about saying that Tower of Babel, you see that in cultures all around the world. This guy really was the king of the world at the time. Everybody came around there. They were all of one language and of one tongue. I want to take this and break it down into 101. We're going to get real advanced and get into some crazy theories that I'm sure some of you have never heard before. But for our audience that might not be as familiar with the story, we just wanted to take a second to introduce you to this character named Nimrod, talk a little bit about Babel and his role within the Bible so you can catch up to the game here. So we have this historian here. His name is Flavius Josephus, super duper famous if you've never heard of him. And he's, just a famous historian, and he wrote a lot about the antiquity of the Jews. Was one of the largest works he has in his book. So,
And it's
right
a large
here,
one.
yes, yeah, he covers everything, basically the whole Old Testament up until around like Jesus and the disciples.
Off topic. You know that copy of Josephus that me and you were passing around for the past like 12 years? Do you have that still?
I think I gave it back to you when I moved out of that trailer because I bought a new copy when I lived at my in-laws home.
Because I don't have it anymore, so I'm not sure what happened to it. But we were passing it back and forth a lot, and this is where I first read this was in that copy. A lot of good stuff in there, man. But it's real heavy reading, so make sure you got a cup of coffee when you start.
Yeah, right, exactly. Maybe a Tylenol, man, because those are written in columns. You have each page is like 2 columns worth of writing, and so it's skinny, but
you need coffee. You need to be up. And
All
right, Brock, go ahead and let's read some of this and just give a good introduction about who Nimrod was in the Jewish mind. Now, this is Josephus in the 1st century AD. Okay, so he was in the time of Jesus. And Nimrod was way before that. I believe that he built the tower in it was like a little over 100 years after the flood, and we'll get into some text that show that later. But Ross, let's go ahead and read this some.
Let's do it, man. So here's the writing of Josephus, and he says, "Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man and of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it was through his means that they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his power." Wow, is that not some type of foreshadowing there for a one world government? He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. Wow, wow. Now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains nor being in any degree negligent about the work. Unbelievable. Does that not sound like where we're headed today in some regard?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, he was going to avenge himself on God. He planned to ascend into heaven and kill God.
Yeah, man.
With this tower. Now, little foreshadowing. There's two schools of thought on the tower. Okay, um, one school of thought is that it was about height, and when you read about the size of the base of the tower, we'll get into that. It sounds like it is, but there's another school of thought that it was some kind of a supernatural stargate, and that it was used to access a window into heaven and be able to travel to the third heaven. So that's I don't know, Bronson, where do you stand on that?
I've gone back and forth on both. Check out our Ether video for a little bit of understanding on where we're coming from the stargates and whatnot. But these days, I lean a little more towards the height, and I get that some from extra biblical texts like Jasher that talks about how important it was for a brick and et cetera, things I'm sure we'll get into in the following week.
Yeah.
That's where I lean towards. Where are you at?
I'm there too. I believe it was about height and actually accessing physically the windows of the firmament to get there. I've gone back and forth on it too, and I could see either way. But I just thought that was something fun to throw out there while we were talking about it. But yeah, he planned to, regardless of how it was, he planned to ascend into heaven and avenge God, avenge himself on God, basically kill God for sending the flood. And this whole thing, this whole description here just reeks of pride and arrogance.
Yeah.
That it's cowardice to submit to God, to your creator. It's cowardice. And he played on the pride of men and gradually changed the government into tyranny so that no men could survive without depending on the government.
Right. It's your own courage which procured your happiness. That sounds like a message I see on TikTok every day.
Yeah. The self-love movement.
Yeah.
The Bible says you're to die to self. And everything today, all the positivity movement and all that, and I'm not saying it's bad to be positive, not whatsoever, but the whole positivity movement is about self-love and self-care. And I mean, really what it stems back to really is just self-loathing.
Yes, right.
Because they have that hole in them and they just can't get it filled. No matter how much you love self, it doesn't do it. The hole in you is searching for God. And we talked about that a little bit last week, or over the past few weeks, but that's it's the same thing.
It sure is, man.
Focus on self, the pridefulness, the self-centeredness, and just the pride. The pride is what, and hubris, to think that you could ascend into heaven and kill God.
Right. Do you think there's a little bit of trauma there? I mean, I know I'm using some softer terminology for maybe some audience members who are
some self-care terminology.
Yeah, exactly. When the whole world gets flooded, and it's like a little bit of a. I was thinking about Noah the other day. Somebody had said something to me through the internet, of course, where they're talking about, well, look at this prophet for God getting drunk and stuff, and it's like, man, you wouldn't say that to somebody who served overseas and fought in a war. You would understand them drinking a little bit.
About Noah, guess what? Nobody ever said Noah was Jesus Christ.
That's a fact.
Nobody ever said that Noah was perfect. He was perfect in his generations, and he was a holy man, but even the holiest of men stumble and fall. I know we've talked about it several times because it's one of my favorite sayings in the Bible, where Paul said, I am the chief of all sinners. And think about how good of a guy Paul was after his conversion and spreading the gospel of Christ everywhere. and then still saying he's the chief of all sinners. You know what I mean? So what would that make me and you and everybody else? For the most part, Moses. We talked about this. Moses murdered those two guys. David, took the guy's wife and sent him to the front lines of war to die. Think of all the things Solomon did. There's not one perfect person that walked this earth except for Jesus Christ.
And if I saw a whole bunch, not even a whole bunch, the entire world drown to death, excuse me, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. You know what I mean?
He planted a vineyard, had wine. So he's not perfect. So just like we're not perfect, we may slip and say things that you don't find appropriate or anything else. We're fallen creatures, just like everybody else, just like Moses was, just like Noah was, just like literally everybody in the Bible. They don't hide the bad things they did.
Right.
It's not hidden because it's not a secret that nobody is perfect. We all fall short and come short of the glory of God. That's a very biblical thing. So if you're looking for anybody other than Jesus Christ to be perfect, you're going to be sadly disappointed. Especially if you're looking for Christians around you to be perfect, you're going to be super sadly disappointed. I mean, it's nobody is perfect. Nobody, anybody that's an honest person is never going to claim perfection. We're all the chief of sinners. And I know what I've done. Bronson, you know what you've done, and you guys on the other side of the screen, you guys know what you've done. You're not perfect. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. So no, that's just how it is.
And then it's no different, man.
Now, getting back to this, what's redeeming for us is that realization that we're not perfect and that we need, and we humble ourselves, not prideful, humble ourselves and ask for forgiveness, and then change and just try to take up our cross and be the most like Jesus that we can be.
Amen.
But for the other side of it, that's cowardice. That goes against the pride. And I'm as guilty as anybody with the pridefulness, but we've talked about this before as well. Please go back and watch the other videos, guys. Y'all don't have to give us any money to do anything like that, but if you're going to watch, catch up, because we cover a lot of these things in other videos. But pride was one of the major character traits of the Nephilim. Okay. And this statement right here just reeks of Nimrod being like the Nephilim, and it seems like he longs for the days for before the flood. Now, he didn't live before the flood, but he wants those days. He's mad at God because they're gone. He wants to be walking with these lowercase g gods. He wants to be in that Atlantean age. He wants that knowledge, and I believe he got some of that knowledge too, whether it was through Canaan, which it very well could be, that we've talked about before. But that's what he's looking towards. That's what he aspires to be. And he's taken on these traits here and have pushed it on the other people with this pridefulness and this vengefulness, and even thought him so prideful he thought he could kill God.
So, I imagine a lot of that comes from anger too, that God took away that opportunity from him. If I would have been born 100 years earlier, this God took away my chance to be in this, what would you call it, the golden age, not that I think that or Austin thinks that, but there are a lot of people out there.
From Nimrod's standpoint, he's the one that it seems to be the father of these mystery schools and this line of thinking about, that was the golden ages. He seems to be the originator of looking at it that way.
Amen.
Topsy-turvy, reverse Uno card, you know what I mean? Completely backwards, Sodom and Gomorrah were cities of light, that type of thinking. And this seems to be where it originated from. He saw it as a golden age and longed for it. And was angry with God that he flooded it out and destroyed it, and used that as a propaganda piece to turn people against God.
Great introduction, man. Great introduction to Nimrod. Awesome discussion.
Right, let's go on to the next clip. This is Trey Smith. This is the guy everybody says sounds like Pauly Shore. I like this guy. So we're going to use some of his stuff here. He covers Nimrod in a few videos, and I highly suggest you guys go check out his videos. I don't agree with him 100% on everything. A lot of the prophecy stuff that he covers, not really into. But a lot of his documentaries are super, super good.
Entertaining.
And very entertaining. A side note, nice, a fun little game is, get you a snack or something. I won't say do a drinking game, but that's the same vein. Eat a snack or something every time he pops the heck out of his TV.
You're gonna be full. You're gonna be full.
You're gonna be full quick. But yeah,
That's
let's go ahead and get to this clip, man.
Of looking at going towards that Tower of Babel and the rise of your first dark empires by Lord Nimrod, who's called on your Sumerian texts, like the Sumerian Kings List, in Merkur, the mighty hunter. Truly the birth of your opening occult empires, following the flood, where all of your opening settlements and cities would begin to emerge right here in what's called the Fertile Crescent, following the Tigris and Euphrates, and swooping down over here into Egypt, where Nineveh, Babylon, Kish or Cush, Uruk, and of course the ziggurat of Eridu, otherwise known as the Tower of Babel, would take their rise in the new opening of all earth. In fact, all earth would be called at that time Sumer and Akkad. Sumer is typically this area right about here, and Akkad this area right up in here. And we're going to be looking at a lot of their little rocks, like this copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh that I'm holding in my hand, and sort of going over the basics. Well, and probably not basics to you, but they might be basics to some of the basics. Some of the basics that even university professors probably don't know, or probably have been taught something that looks more like this.
Wow, man, that is so neat. So he goes over some maps here. We see some geography. We see these tablets. He mentioned something called the Sumerian King List, which Austin and I were discussing earlier. It's just some rocks found in Sumer, correct? That are just a list of kings that reigned in the ancient times. That's a fair way to state that.
Yeah, real ancient times. You have people on that list that have that ruled for 43,000 years, 36,000 years, and they have it broken down in antediluvian. That's pre-Noah's flood. They have it broken down until I think it's like 5 or 6 kings before the flood and a whole bunch afterwards. But just the amount of time that they reigned is insane. And I think we'll probably do a breakdown of the Sumerian list, at another time. But it's definitely interesting, and there's a lot we can get into on that to tie it to the Sumerian and the Hebrew account is almost telling you the same story, but from 2 different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
One from a polytheist pagan perspective, and then one from that line of Noah coming through Shem that followed the Most High God. Not all of them by any stretch of the means, but that's where the bloodline of Jesus, comes down to David and then goes to Jesus from that line of Shem. But,
and these rocks were found right where he's pointing, yeah?
Yes, in Samaria. Yeah, that would be that southern part of the map where you have, the Tower of Babel, and all that. And then the northwest region where Nineveh is, that would be Akkad. So you have Akkad in the north, like he was explaining, and Sumer in the south.
Beautiful. Just trying to paint a good picture. And if you're not watching, just listening at home, just giving you an idea of where this tower would have been, when we call him the king of the world, I don't think he had, maybe the South Pole. You know what I mean? Maybe not.
Yeah, described it in this clip as being, Sumer and Akkad, which to them was the world. And at that point, there wasn't much more to it. You had Japheth in the north, and then you have this mixture down here, and I believe Japheth was down here at the Tower of Babel too, and there's lots of sources that say that. But this is, Nimrod was out of the line of Ham, and you had Shem in this area as well. Burl have you Shem and Ham, and then you do have some Japhethites in here. But yeah. All right, so let's go on to the next thing.
Great introduction. You have a pretty good idea of who Nimrod is, man. And now we're going to take a look into some other accounts that we see of him. And if you are unfamiliar with this, we are in a book called Jasher. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is our first time reading from Jasher on this channel. If you've been following along with us, we've gone through Jubilees a little bit here and there. And this is just a very similar text. It's a, if you want to call it a commentary, I suppose that's appropriate, but it's another retelling of the story of Genesis. Is that fair, Austin?
Yeah, we're going to be getting into a few videos and things. He covered Nimrod a lot, and rest in peace, Rob Skiba. He called Jasher, Jubilees, Enoch, and Genesis as the what was it? The
Linear extra biblical synchronized.
The synchronized extra biblically. The biblically endorsed synchronized extra biblical text. That's Jasher, Jubilees, and Enoch. And I think he has a copy of that. You can get it all together. I think he has some commentary in there. There is a sect of people that do not like Jasher and really like Jubilees. There's another sect that really like Jasher and don't like Jubilees. And those two books contradict a little bit. I'm not going to get into the arguments on that here, but we're just going to try and give an all-encompassing thing about Nimrod. And you got to go to other sources if you want to try and color in the full story here, because you only get that little section that's in the Bible, and you get Nimrod in a couple places and talks about like the land of Nimrod. There's some things like that, but that description there in Genesis 10 is the most that you get. You're not going to get anything else really anywhere. But here in Jasher, we can go ahead and go through this right here and tell the story a little bit, and it gives you a little more example of what was going on here in the line of Ham. And there's also another name that's used in the Bible for Nimrod that we'll talk about right after we read this section.
Absolutely. So to let you guys know where we are, obviously we're in Jasher. That's Jasher, but we're in chapter 7. And you may be unfamiliar with this text to your knowledge, but you've probably heard more about it than what you think you have. If you've ever heard some of the theories that at the Tower of Babel, they were making war with God, I am a strong, firm believer that this is where your pastor and historians get that type of theory from. So I could be wrong on that, but that's what I think.
I believe that's where Josephus got, where he was saying he wanted to avenge against God. I believe he pulls it right from here.
I think so too. So in verse 23, and Cush.
I'm sorry, sir. Before you start, could we zoom in a little bit if it's possible?
Yeah, I may lose some text, and when I do, I'll use these arrow keys to zoom to scroll. Hey, all right, yeah, we're good. How's that? You like that? Does that look good?
Yeah, much better, man. Much better for my old eyes.
Cool. All right, so here we are in verse 23. And Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah, took a wife in those days in his old age, and she bare a son, and they called his name Nimrod, saying, at that time the sons of men again began to rebel and transgress against God. And the child grew up, and his father loved him exceedingly, for he was the son of his old age.
So he was the spoiled baby.
Yeah, I've heard a couple people call him that. He's the spoiled brat. So the garments of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden were given to Cush. If you are unfamiliar with that story, that's, when they sinned, they found themselves naked. You can check out our commentary for that, or just read the first couple chapters of Genesis. An animal had to die for the sins of Adam and Eve, and that garment, the skin of that animal, was turned into clothing. So just a little context there.
By God himself.
By God himself. Yeah, dude. You think your Armani shirt's cool? Adam and Eve had one by God. That's pretty dope. So, and the garments of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden, they were given to Cush. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, the son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave them to Methuselah, his son. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them on the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. But in their going out, Ham stole those garments from Noah his father, and took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begat his first son Cush, he gave him the garments in secret, and they were with Cush many days. And Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave him those garments through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up. When he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. Crazy to think he held them away from his other children too. He must have had a real fondness for this young son.
Well, it also says that he was his child of his old age.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
those, and you can look at Joseph, who was the
I was
child.
thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and he was the most loved one. He was a child of the old age. When you get older, you're more calm, you're more wise, you're more patient. You're a lot of times the work that you had going on with your other kids is not, you don't have to as much. You're more distinguished and established. You know what I mean? You have more time to give that kind of love and everything else. And so he was in his old age, so he must have been coming close to death, and was doing his will. And the most important thing he had that I know of was these garments. And so the child that he loved the most, the child of old age who he had time to foster relationships with, that's who he gave it off to.
Wow, it's very, very cool, man. So he gives these garments to Nimrod, and here we are in verse 30. Something crazy happens. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments, and God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered upon them the animals before the Lord. So at 20 years old, we see him offering animals to God. So there's something here in the youth of Nimrod where he seems to be acting maybe appropriately. So granted, at the same time, Cain made offerings too. So there's that. But 31, and then Nimrod strengthened himself and rose up from amongst his brothers, and he fought the battles of his brothers against all their enemies round about.
So who would be their enemies at the time?
That's a good question, man. Why are they fighting?
This goes back to my working theory.
Okay.
And that is, goes back to Jubilees when we had the earth split up that we talked about. They had to be warned against the Japhethites and the Semitic people from Shem.
Mm-hmm.
I really think a lot of what we see even to this day is wars between those three houses and the upper echelons of those houses, where you have the Japhethites, the Hamites, the Semitic people. I cannot prove it, man, but just something that's been eating at me for years about this. And I believe you see this here, that, he rose up against the battles against his, their enemies. And I believe that would have to be from the other lines of people.
Yeah. No, I think you may be onto something there, man. The more you talk about that theory, the more I actually really, really like it. And there's an interesting line here that I have a tendency, if you've been watching any of these videos, to read a little too deep, and Austin does a great job of pulling me out of the water sometimes. So when we see, and he fought the battles of his brethren, my brain immediately goes to something like a Samuel or like a John Wick or whatever, where he's soloing armies at a time. Do you get that type of vibe, or do you think maybe he's just a captain or a leader?
Well, he's probably a leader, but those garments, it said they strengthened him.
Yeah.
In the Bible, the phrase that's used is he began to be a mighty hunter in the earth. Now, that began to be appears to happen after he puts on these garments. So he began to be a mighty hunter in the earth. And in the Septuagint version, which is the Greek translation that came out of Alexandria, it used the word gigantus there, like the giant. He began to be a giant in the earth. Now, I don't know if these garments made him bigger or it did make him stronger, but they said he began to become a giant in the earth. Now, you wonder, especially when you read into this, and the more we look into it, the more you see he was a prideful, arrogant guy, which is like the giants, very prideful and arrogant. Go read the David and Goliath story and see what, Goliath was doing. He's taunting him. He was out there basically showboating this guy here, that type of deal. Look at me, I'm the best around. That's them. Super prideful, super self-centered. So that may be what they were talking about. I don't know if his size increased. I assume it probably did a little bit. With strength, comes size.
Yeah.
But it seems to happen right here when he puts the garments on. Now, did it corrupt him right away? It doesn't appear to. It appears that he built altars and sacrificed to the Lord. But as he starts, fighting these battles, maybe he just gets more bloodthirsty, and then that corrupts him as he goes along. Let's keep reading a little bit.
Yeah, great speculation there, man. That's fun. So here we are in 31. That was where he strengthens himself and fights the battle. So in 32, and the Lord delivered all the enemies of his brethren in his hands, and God prospered him from time to time in his battles, and he reigned upon the earth. Therefore, it became current in those days, when a man ushered forth those that he had trained up for battle, he would say to them, like God did to Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in the earth, and who succeeded in the battles that prevailed against his brethren, that he delivered them from the hands of their enemies, so may God strengthen us and deliver us this day. So he became kind of like a proverb. What this is saying, that was kind of a long verse, long-winded, but when a man had trained up for people for battle, essentially he was saying, let God do for us what he did for Nimrod, let's go out there and
Yeah, he was like that in many ways. Like it says, and it's said to this day, he's a modern hunter, like Nimrod was.
mm-hmm.
He was, the man of that time, and the man of many, 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 many names. There's
Yes.
a lot of names that a lot of people think are transliterated, from Nimrod, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But let's go ahead and read this here.
Cool. So when Nimrod was 40 years old, this is 20 years past now. He put him on at the age of 20. 20 years later, when he's 40 years old, there was a war between his brethren and the children of Japheth.
There it is.
Yeah. So that they were in the power of their enemies. And Nimrod went forth at that time, and he assembled all the sons of Cush and their families. And he may have been a very charismatic person, man. He just seems to have.
He had to have been. He had to have been.
He just pulls people together and just causes people to unite. It's just crazy. There was about 460 of them, and he hired also from some of his friends and acquaintances about 80 men. Dude, I've got lots of friends for somebody my age, but I ain't got no 80. And he gave them for their hire, and he went with them to battle. And when he was on the road, Nimrod strengthened the hearts of the people that went with him. Man, yeah, he sounds like a heck of a general.
Charismatic leader, yeah.
Yeah. And he said to them, do not fear, neither be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do with them as you please. And all the men that went were about 500, and they fought against their enemies, and they destroyed them and subdued them. And Nimrod placed standing officers over them in their respective places. And
so now we're seeing the formation of government. He's appointing basically governors for the region, that the governors answer to him. He's developing hierarchy in the government here.
Yeah, no doubt. And if I'm not mistaken, my lack of education may show in the statement, but is it not uncommon for some of these more ancient civilizations, their rulers were in some way, shape, or form militant as well, right? You see famous generals become leaders and, big owners of land like Shogun.
Almost every time, unless it's some kind of heretical thing, or not heretical, but heredity, passing the kingship down. But no, all the initial rulers of any civilization, even here in the United States, like George Washington was a general. All founding members there, it's always the law of the jungle before you have a land subdued, and then culture takes place, and then whether you have some kind of democratic thing or just a bloodline, royal bloodline passed, where it's passed down from, father to son or father to brother or whatever, some kind of heredity. Always the founder is always a general, is always a man of war, because that's how you get these land, is through conquering. You don't, there's very few instances to where, somebody was just so loved that everybody was there, nominated him king. No, that's not how it works. Not how it works at all. The ancient world is a good representation for where we're most likely heading. Albert Einstein once said that, I don't know what weapons the Third World War will be fought with, but the fourth world war will be fought with sticks and stones.
Wow, I've heard that. I forgot about that quote. That's perfect.
So that would be the world that we'll be heading into after the next big war pops off, because the weapons are so insane that it'll be back to sticks and stones and swords and shields and all that type of stuff if it plays out the way that it appears it will be. But all right, let's go ahead and get back into it. There's some good stuff here.
Yeah. So, and all the men that were with him were 500, and he destroyed them and subdued them. And he took some of their children as security, and they were all servants to Nimrod and to his brethren. And Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. I imagine some of their children as security meant maybe some arranged marriages, perhaps?
No, not at all.
What do you think?
So go back to the verse before that.
All the men were 500 that fought against their enemies and destroyed
Placing
them.
officers in their places, and he took children as security. So what he did is he would take, all right, in the ancient world, and even still some today, when you win a battle, you get your spoils of war, you place a governor, somebody who's familiar with the region. He may not even be super loyal to you, but he's somebody that, you know, knows the area, you know, knows how to govern, knows how to facilitate, has connections. You may not have those same connections to the land, you know what I mean? But that person does, and he would be your figurehead over that area to keep the rebellions quelled. But to keep them in line, the people that you leave over top of you take their children hostage. So as long as they're doing what you say and following your orders and, you know, carrying out things you want to, the children are just fine and fed and well taken care of in the royal house, and may eventually be married into it. But if you don't,
Right.
your kids are going to die, and then we're going to ride in there and torch that place and put somebody else in your spot. So you can either do what we say, or we come back and kill you after we murder your children. That's how it works.
Yeah, yeah. That seems like a very effective strategy. Not gonna lie to you.
What you're seeing here is you're seeing how these ancient worlds, how these ancient governments set things up, and Nimrod is the founder of this.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that's coming up with all this stuff that's mimicked throughout time.
Yeah. You think maybe some of this wisdom he's got here, because it sounds wicked, I understand. I'm not trying to praise him for his actions, but it's a wise decision to make. It's very strategic. Do you think some of this may have come from Cush, as Cush may have learned some things from Ham? Ham would have been around pre-flood and maybe have seen some of the giants do something similar?
It could be, but it seems like he's a very charismatic guy and understands the way the human mind works. I don't believe that you would have to be told that people love their children.
Yeah, true.
And how else would you make somebody hundreds of miles away obey you? I mean, if say he didn't take children as security, right? He would have to load up all the armies, load up all the grain and all the, you know, the whiskey or whatever it may be for drink and food and for preservatives and all this type of stuff, load up all the weapons of war, make sure all the animals are fed, you have enough grain for them, you know, you have all the stuff you have to load right back up and go right back and quell a rebellion.
Right.
The much easier thing would be put somebody in charge who knows the area, can control the people, keep them calm down, and then you take their children as security. You take the most precious thing to them, and, you know, no matter what, they're going to fall in line to keep their child safe. So it's much easier to coerce than it would be to load up an entire army and travel back then horse, you know, probably, you know, chariots, but just say horse and buggy for lack of, you know, wanting to go further, and then go 300 miles, you know, on a trek that may take 3 years, and you don't know what happens back in your kingdom. You may, you know, while the army's away, somebody may come and conquer that. You know, a lot of risks there, a lot of supplies, a lot of resources, and a whole lot of time to go quell a rebellion in a place that you already conquered and everything else. The simple thing is just to control through coercion and fear.
Yeah. Nicely explained. Very, very nice. Down here in verse 39. And when Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle, after having conquered his enemies, all his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them. And they placed the regal crown upon his head. And he set over his subjects and people, princes, judges, and rulers, as is the custom amongst kings. And we get into some of the people he placed over. So this is a gentleman named Terah or Terah. He's the son of Nahor. This sounds very much like Abraham's line, if I'm not mistaken. And he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. And while he was reigning according to his heart's desire, after having conquered all his enemies around, he advised with his counselors to build a city for his palace. And they did so. And they found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar, for the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. And Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them. And he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great. And all nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to them, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings, and became their Lord and King. And they all dwelt with him in the city at Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel. And all the earth was of one tongue, of words of union. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord, and he was more wicked than all the men that were before him, from the days of the flood until those days. And he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed down to them, and he rebelled against the Lord, and taught all his subjects and the people of the earth his wicked ways. And Mardon, his son, was more wicked than his father. Jeez Louise. And everyone that heard of the acts of Mardon, the son of Nimrod, would say concerning him, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. And it was current in the words of men from that time to this. And we have a similar saying today. And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king of his subjects. And the king and the princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And we're going to get into right after that in the following weeks as we continue down our commentary in Genesis. We'll start probably at the very end of this chapter here, where we see the birth of a child named Abram.
Let's finish it out.
Sure.
Let's finish it out, because we'll get into this a little bit.
Yeah. So Terah, he took a wife, and her name was Omphelo, the daughter of Cornebo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. Terah was 70 years old when he begat him. And Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days, and dignified him above all his princes that were with him.
All right, so we have a little bit of a setup coming here. So you have Nimrod reigning, Terah working under Nimrod, and then you have Abraham being born. So, guys, keep that in mind, and we're going to go back to that a little bit. Now, do you have anything you want to add after reading all that? That was a pretty in-depth description about what was going on. You get names, and you get the war between the Hamites and the Japhethites that we had kind of talked about a little bit beforehand, what I assume who they were battling with.
To add anything, as and we saw in that first short with the gentleman with that, I don't know if it was Irish or Scottish, forgive me guys, I live in America, I don't know. He had that cool accent, and he said that this is kind of the formula for the first one world order. Well, we see that starting to form there in the book of Jasher.
Let's be clear about that. The first one after the flood.
Agreed. Yes. So all these people come together. They put a crown on him. They're enjoying him. They are adoring him for his feats. And there's probably a lot of safety in that. They're saying, look, if people are warring and having problems, if we have our allegiance with Mr. Nimrod here, then maybe for a small tribute and some taxes, if somebody comes against us, we have the backing of Nimrod. And there may have been some safety in that type of alliance there, you think?
At the time, do you think the phrase, who could say they're a king like Nimrod? Does that sound like a pretty apt description?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Well, that leads us into our next clip here, and this is from Rob Skiba. Now, Rob had taken from the works of a guy named Peter Goodgame, and we'll show that here in a minute. just to show you guys the URL where you can find it, a little bit of the source material, and you can trace back what he's talking about. Rob had the theory that Nimrod would be the coming Antichrist. And that might sound a little far-fetched, but let's let Rob explain it just a little bit. And guys, we'll probably stop this video and cut around a little bit. So it's a 46-minute video, but a lot of it pertains to what we're doing today. So Bronson, I'll keep my mic on and let you know when to cut.
Perfect.
All right, guys, let's get into it.
And Yeshua said in Matthew 24:37, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Which means, if I take that literally, the last days are going to mirror the days of Noah. And if you keep reading, like in Luke, I believe it's 21, where he's talking, he says, except those days be shortened, no flesh would be saved. Something's going to happen, and it's going to be really bad, to the point where God's going to have to wipe the whole world out again, this time with fire, because of a repeat of what happened in Genesis chapter 6. What has been will be again, Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 1:9, right? So it is my opinion that these are probably hybrids. When they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. There's an interesting phrase right there. How is Yeshua referred to in the beginning of Revelation? The one who what? Was and... So the one who was and is to come. So this one's called the one who was and is not and yet is. Huh. Interesting. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads of the beast, remember the beast has 7 heads, right? Are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. A lot of people will stop there and say, see, it's the Vatican. Or they'll go off into 7 kingdoms, talking about kingdoms. Well, next sentence says there are 7 kings. I'm not talking about kingdoms there. Now, true, kings rule over kingdoms. That's true. But he's telling us to focus on individual people, not on kingdoms, though they may rule them. There are 7 kings. 5 of these individuals have fallen. 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. There's a ton of detail given in those few verses right there. So let's just go with the text here. It says we got 5 have fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. Okay. First thing we need to address again is that the word that was used there is kings. The Greek word is basileus. Strong's Concordance number 935, defined as a king, a ruler, an emperor. John did not use the closely related word basileia, Strong's Concordance number 932, which means kingship, sovereignty, rule over kingdom, etc. So all these teachers are out there saying it's seven kingdoms. That's not what the text says in English nor in Greek. It's talking about individuals we need to be looking at. So the 5 had fallen. Now, when I first started going down this line of thought, I had read a book by a guy named Peter Goodgame, who wrote a book called The Giza Discovery. That's online for free. You can, I think it's thegizadiscovery.com or redmoonrising.com, I think is his website. Anyway, if you could just Google The Giza Discovery by Peter Goodgame. He was going down this same line of thought and put together a list of the people that he thought fit for the list of the 5 have fallen, 1 now is, and 1 is to come. And his list was based on, okay, if we know we're talking about the beast, we know we're talking about the Antichrist, let's look for people in the biblical account and in history who fit Antichrist-like characteristics. We know what the Antichrist is going to do and some of his characteristics. So let's see how many people we could find that fit the bill, basically. And this was the list that he came up with. And as I did my own research, and again, I consider.
All right. Do you have any suggestions for this list before we get into it?
Well, I have a little bit of a bias here because I have been watching Rob Skiba for like 10 years. So some of my original introductions to this, to all of this, to Nimrod and to a lot of it, I can attribute a lot of that to Mr. Rob Skiba.
I think it's pretty safe to say that neither me or you would be sitting here doing this right now if it wasn't for Rob Skiba.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely a fair statement.
There's other people out there that we definitely draw inspiration from and really like and everything else, but The guy that really, at least I'm speaking for myself here, I let Brawlson speak for him, but for me, the guy that really grabbed me, and granted, I don't agree with some of the stuff that Rob says, and some of the stuff I've kind of grown and read and researched more that I don't agree with, but the guy that really grabbed me and shook me awake from my churchianity, you know, just, you know, basic, you know, understandings of things that's in church and really like shook me wide awake was Rob Skiba.
Oh, most certainly. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, man, I've shown lots of people his videos over the years, and it had the same effect on them. And I'm talking
Yes.
about people that are Satanists, people that are into witchcraft, people that are into all kinds of stuff. I've shown them Rob Skiba videos, and some of these people are Christians to this day, and they were shaken wide awake by this dude. I've seen people say, "Oh, he was a gatekeeper, oh this and that or whatever." I'm not sure what gates he was, a keeper of. The dude lost a whole lot of money and work and everything else with some of the stuff that he stood by a lot. So I don't know where that comes from, but I know the dude had a profound impact on the world before he died.
Yes. We
Profound
lost
on my life, and I think on Brawson's life, and a lot of people that I know of. This was the guy, and it you hear about celebrities or people that pass away all the time. This was the only one that it ever like, oh, dude, they took Skiba, and what happened around his death was very, very strange.
Mm-hmm.
Look into that for yourself. But as far as identifying the beast, that's very interesting. The one that was, is not, and yet will be. So it had to have been somebody that was here before.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, 100%. And maybe my most recent theory I shared with you, pre-recording of this video, might not make a whole lot of sense if I were to say it now. It might sound kind of silly, but yeah, it's the wording there certainly seems that when he says 5 have come, 1 is, and 1 is yet to be, right? But the one that yet to be has already been, if I'm not mistaken. That's if it's not a direct quote, that's pretty close.
Yeah, that's what he just was reading through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're right on that, man.
Well, let's see what Skiba has to say here.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Dude, I never thought one day you and me would be having like filming reaction videos to Rob Skiba. That's pretty cool.
We probably should have done it a lot earlier, man.
Yeah, probably so.
Consider myself to be a researcher. By that I mean I research what has been searched by others before me. I don't take anything, and I don't want you to take anything that I say any more than I take anything somebody else says, just as gospel truth.
Pause there.
Take it, absorb it, write notes down, and go search it.
That applies to us as well. And it applies to anybody, not even just because Rob Skiba is saying, or I'm saying, or Bros is saying it. No matter what you hear from anybody, you need to write down, research, pray about it yourself. Do not take anything that anybody tells you it was 100% fact until you take it to the Father, you do your own research on it. 100%. Me and Bros have talked about it. There's been a couple times where I've given corrections over things I've said. Sometimes I just mess up and I just get numbers or dates mixed up, or where something is in a verse mixed up. I'm far from perfect, guys. And Bronson, I'm sure will tell you the same thing about him. But I did want to pause it there because that's very important. No matter what Rob Skiba says, no matter what the Pope says, no matter what anybody says, Trump, whoever it may be, do your own research and take it to the Father. Ask for the Holy Spirit's guidance on things. Because there's maybe something I'm telling you today or tomorrow or the next day that I believe 100% is right, and that I might come across something to figure out, oh man, I was wrong. Oh no, and I may have been telling you with total conviction, and and you never know. You never know. We can all be deceived. So I think that's a very important part of what Rob Skiba says there is, don't believe me. Go and research for yourself. I'm giving you information Go research for yourself. And it's going to be a lot of moments like that tonight to where you got to do some deep research yourself, because we can only have so much time here. It's already 1 o'clock in the morning here, and we've both got to be up in like 5 hours. So do your own research, guys. Do your own research. All right, let's go ahead and get into it, man.
It out for yourself, pray, and let the Holy Spirit be your teacher, not me or anybody else. So when I hear somebody give something that just kind of really resonates with me, I'm like, cool, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to go look it up and go search for myself. I found that I agreed with the list that he came up with a few exceptions that we'll cover. Number 1, Nimrod. He's the first king in the Bible, in the post-flood world, certainly. He's tried to create a one-world system without God. In fact, his goal was to kill God. That sounds a lot like the Antichrist. Look at what he's trying to do, New World Order. He's going to make war with the one coming on the horse. Wants to, that we know that's Yeshua, so certainly fits. Pharaoh of Egypt at the time of the Exodus. This is something I recently stumbled across. It was a teaching done by Chuck Missler based on Isaiah 52:4, if I remember the address right. And he was basically saying that there's a very good likelihood, based on the wording of the text, that the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus was an Assyrian. And what I find interesting about that is, if you look at the timeline, a lot of people will say that the Jews were slaves in Egypt for how many years?
Oh, wow, that is crazy. And I've watched a lot of his videos before, but years later, after watching these things, it is a very and relatively recent discovery of mine, maybe like a year and a half ago, where I finally realized that, wait a second, that Pharaoh in Moses' time, he's not even an Egyptian. Yeah.
No, the Hyksos kings.
Yeah.
The shepherd kings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And most likely they were Canaanites, I believe. Now, when in the Bible, when that story talks about, the Pharaoh that came to power did not know Joseph. After, all the years of storing the grain and him being elevated to, second in command of all of Egypt and all of that type of stuff, this Pharaoh did not know Joseph. And you would figure, that within the line of those Egyptian pharaohs and everything else, that they would pass that down. But this was a new line of kings, these Hyksos kings, shepherd kings.
Right.
They were foreigners to the land. They were like usurpers to the crown.
Right. Absolutely right. It seems like Egypt, and from my studies, like I said, it was about a year and a half ago or so. But from what I can recall, it seems like they lost a battle and had their place taken over by a different set of leaders who adopted the name Pharaoh, and that's why he didn't know Joseph.
Do you know what Pharaoh means?
As soon as you tell me, I'm gonna say, man, I knew that. What is it?
God King.
Yeah, God King. Yeah, I knew that, bro. Yeah. Yeah, this is so far I like his list, man. Nimrod definitely sounds like an Antichrist figure. Pharaoh of Egypt definitely sounds like an Antichrist figure. This makes a lot of sense to me.
All right, let's get back into it, brother.
That's what everybody says, right? So Paul said, he set the guardrails up. Paul said from the giving of the covenant of Abraham until the giving of the Torah is 430 years. Nobody's in Egypt for 400 years during those guardrails. From the time of Abraham until Joseph is sold into slavery, other than a few trips there and back, but nobody's like spending time there, and certainly nobody's enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. From Abraham to Joseph is 215 years. So nobody's even in Egypt for 215 years. Then what happens? Joseph, he goes to prison, but he gets out, right? What happens next? Joseph is what? Made second in command of all of Egypt. So he's next to the Pharaoh. He's the guy, right? So, go a little bit forward from 215, and he's made, the second in command. And then the house of Jacob comes down, right, from Canaan. And then what happens then? Where do they go? Goshen. They're given like the best of the land of Egypt, and they're living like regional governors and princes in the land of Egypt. So now you're extending the timeline even further. Nobody's a slave yet. Best I can figure, they probably went into slavery right about the time of Moses' birth or very shortly before that. So 80 to 100 years max is all you can fit in the 430-year guardrail when you realize nobody's there until 215, and you progress that forward. So then a pharaoh shows up that didn't remember Joseph. Well, how could that be if he was a Egyptian? National leaders, it's a good idea. You need to know your own history of the nation you're going to rule, right? Especially if you're coming of the people, for the people, by the people type of scenario, right? So if it's an Egyptian rising up through the ranks to become the next pharaoh, he obviously would know about the other pharaohs in the history and Joseph, because it's not that far. I mean, we're talking maybe 100 years from the death of Joseph to the time that Moses is born. So Chuck Missler is talking about how, I think it says another pharaoh, or whatever the word is used that precedes the pharaoh, indicating a different person. He said the word is heteros, meaning of a different kind. A person of a different kind arose in the land of Egypt and became the pharaoh and didn't know anything about Joseph. And so he put him into slavery. Now, Isaiah 52:4 says, "And thus saith the Lord God, my people went down afore into Egypt to sojourn there, and the Assyrian oppressed them without cause." And so he's got a whole teaching on that. I had never heard that before, but I'm like, well, that's absolutely fascinating, because one of the titles for the Antichrist is the Assyrian. We see that in Micah chapter 5 and elsewhere. There's a number of places it talks about the end-time tyrant as an Assyrian. So, and this guy, the pharaohs, of course, thought themselves to be a god. And they tried to wipe out God's people, right? So he's a good fit, definitely a good candidate for number 2. Number 3, Sennacherib, another Assyrian. Again, thinks himself a god, tries to wipe out God's people. Anybody know what happened to his army? Angel of the Lord came down and wiped out, it was 180,000 or something like that. I forget what the number was, but pretty much the whole army. And then he went home and his sons killed him. But if you think of Antichrist characteristics, he's a good fit. The king of Tyre, if you read about the description of the king of Tyre, it starts off describing him as a man, and all of a sudden the narrative kind of switches and starts talking about Lucifer, Satan. So clearly this guy had some kind of affiliation or likeness of the fallen one for that description to have been given. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes is not in our canonized text, although it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about the church that still has the Maccabees in their Bible, then it is canonized. Regardless, he's in in my current 66-book canon of Scripture, he's in the intertestament period. Those who still have the Apocrypha in their Bibles, it's part of their Bible. He came in there and was killing people, like, you better eat this pig or you die. So start eating pork or you're dead. Set up the statue of Zeus and offered up a pig in the temple, right? And Maccabees, I think it's 1 Maccabees 4, if I remember right, called that act the abomination of desolation. They defined the abomination of desolation as bringing a pig into the temple. And Sheila said, my wife said, wow, if the abomination of desolation was the bringing of a pig into the temple, what are we now? This is the temple of the Holy Spirit. The abomination of desolation, defined as the abomination of desolation, was bringing a pig into the temple. Food for thought. Pardon the pun. Yeah. Something to think about. But I mean, if you look at what he did, he's definitely a good candidate for an Antichrist character. And I would suggest Alexander the Great may be another possible candidate. So I would take number 5 as interchangeable with either of those two guys as possibilities. Alexander the Great, of course, is in the canonized text of the 66-book canon. And he's described as what? What's the symbol used for him? Yeah, the he-goat. Yes, he's described as a he-goat, and he has a horn between his eyes. And it says the horn is the first king. Well, the first king of the Bible is Nimrod. So it appears, as I look at that Alexander the Great.
Now, I don't remember if you remember this or not, and maybe some of you guys do. If you guys have watched the cryptid video, we talked about this he-goat and pulled it up in the vestiary. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
It talks about a he-goat that's not just a male goat. According to that vestiary, it was almost like a mythical creature.
It said its blood could melt diamonds. I just want to throw that out there.
That is right. I forgot about that part. But just a side note for you guys, go check out that cryptids video. I don't think it has very many views, but I think that's my favorite one we've done so far out of all the Christian conspiracy videos. And of course, I like the Bible commentaries better, but out of the Christian conspiracy, now the Hollow Earth one I think is Bronson's favorite. That one's good too. That was our first one, really the first Christian conspiracy we did. But that one with the cryptids has a deep dive on all those cryptid hybrid beings in the Bible. We go deep on that, and we talk about the he-goat extensively. So just wanted to point that out there before we went further.
Thank you very much, man. Yeah, those videos are superb. Real quick, I just wanted to point some things out here, just because I know that we've been filming for a while. It's been a lot of information so far, so I just want to just take a second to cover some of the things that Rob was talking about here, especially if you're just listening and not watching. On his screen, he has a list of 5 fallen kings who he's claiming to have Antichrist type of characters. Number 1, he put Nimrod. We've been talking about him all night. Number 2, he put the Pharaoh of Egypt in the time of Exodus, from Joseph unto Moses. Most of you are probably pretty familiar with that story. Number 3 is Sennacherib. Number 4 is the king of Tyre, and number 5 is Antiochus Epiphanes. These last 3 names, you don't have to be a history scholar or a buff to know these. They are in your Bible. They're there. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes would be in your intertestamental period, in between your Old Testament and your New Testament. And Maccabees, there's a book out there. There's a first, second, and I think there's a third and a fourth. I could be wrong on that though. But
anyway, too, but there may be.
Yeah, but there's certainly 1 and 2. Don't quote me on 3 and 4. But that is a moment of Greek. I'm not going to take too long on this, but in the time of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has a dream, and in the statue there are 4 sections of it. And this is not unto my own private interpretation. It's given to us by Daniel what the dream means. And it's 4 different kingdoms. We have Babylon at the top as the golden head. And you have these 2 arms crossed, which is Media and Persia. And then you have Greece afterwards, and then Rome afterwards, which is typically, the iron legs. And then the feet made of clay mixed with iron, which most people kind of have speculation on that. But
and they will not cleave unto one another. It's talking about like marriage language and procreation. Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting.
Very interesting. And so that Grecian area, this is, again, I am not a history buff at all. I wish I was. I've got a lot to learn. But this is laid out for you in detail. It reveals the secret of the prophecy for you within Daniel. I just want to reiterate, I'm not making this up, or thus thinketh Bronson here. So
also in this list, in case you're just listening, he's interchanging. It could be Antiochus Epiphanes from the Maccabees or Alexander the Great there at that number 5 spot. He says that in his logic, it could be either one of those people.
Yes, both Grecian. Yeah. So there's that. Sennacherib, if I'm not mistaken, was an Assyrian king that came in when the tribes of Israel, there's a time where there's a split, and we'll get into all this into more commentary down the road. Most people that are they're just not a lot of people are familiar with that split between the northern house and the southern house. And Assyria took the northern house into captivity, and that's where Sennacherib is from Assyria. Although I don't believe it was him. I believe it was the next king. But anyway, and then you have the king of Tyre, which he's talking about. That is your chapter of the anointed cherub. Most people are familiar with that. And then, of course, Antiochus Epiphanes, which we just don't have the time to get into all the detail of the Maccabees today. But it is a very simple Google search to do. So I just wanted to recover all of that in case, you got lost within all the words and the timing of the video. Maybe you honestly had to stop.
The most important thing about the Maccabees is to read about how the Levitical priesthood was usurped.
Mm.
And that would lead you into understanding the dynamic between John the Baptist and his father, and what was going on there, and certain things Jesus said. It'll give you a lot of understanding there. Now, there's people that claim that the Maccabees books are fake. Neither here or there. Just it'll give you a good understanding for what's going on.
Yeah,
in the New Testament. Yeah.
Nicely said. All right, I'm sure we'll probably cover that down the road one day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll dive deep into it. I'm not decided on that myself, so I'd like to read over it and check it against things, and it'll take some time.
Yeah, there's some really cool stories in there. I like the book, and I think it's worth reading. I don't think it's going to hurt you or damn your soul or anything. So it's a quick little audio book and some beautiful stories of persecution and martyrdom. I personally have a heart for the martyrs. I don't know where that comes from, but I could read the stories of the martyrs all day, every day. There's just, I don't know why, I just have a certain heart for that. It's really, I don't know, I have a lot of respect for those guys. So, all right, man, you want to keep going?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go.
Great, did whatever he did, at least in the likeness and the spirit of Nimrod. So he's a candidate, in my opinion. The one that now is, well, that depends on when you think is. Like Clinton said, right? What's the definition of is? Well, it depends on when you think John wrote the book of Revelation. If it's an earlier writing or a later writing. You know, I've heard good arguments on both sides. I tend to lean more towards the 90 AD viewpoint, but I've heard good arguments for the earlier, pre-destruction of the temple argument. Either way, you got two Caesars to choose from, Nero or Domitian. Neither one of these were good guys. You know, I suspect Nero was probably worse than Domitian, but, you know, he had a burning candlelit dinners to the burning Christians and things like that.
Right.
But, you know, the Caesars thought themselves to be gods, and they certainly persecuted God's people. So either one, again, would be a good candidate, in my opinion, for the one that was now is at the time when John wrote those words. Now, the one that will come and his reign will be short, I think a reasonable case could be made for Adolf Hitler. Somebody in John's future come, reign for a short period of time, and he's done. I think people who lived during World War II, during the reign of Hitler, probably, I would think the most eschatology teachers at that time were probably looking at this guy saying, we're here. I know that if I was living in those days and knowing what was going on, I would have been having my eye on him for sure. So if this is a reasonable list, then let's continue with the descriptions given in the scriptures. We see that this individual has a deadly head wound, right? And I saw one of the heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And, you know, a lot of people are saying it's Obama right now. And I will admit there is a lot of weirdness surrounding this guy. And I'll talk about him a little bit more as we get further in this presentation. I personally do not obviously believe that he is the Antichrist. I think he may be an Antichrist. There are many Antichrists, but there is the Antichrist beast that we're trying to nail down here. In my personal opinion is he's probably playing the role of a John the Baptist type character, like others before him, preparing the way for what's to come. But, you know, I joke about it, but I'm kind of serious. I don't really think the Antichrist is going to need a teleprompter to address sixth graders. You know, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? I just can't see that applying to a dude that needs a teleprompter to read in front of sixth graders to give a speech. He doesn't impress me, put it that way. But if we look at the list, looking for somebody who has a deadly head wound, well, Nimrod, in numerous accounts of this character, he became known by many names. We talked about last night how at the Tower of Babel, everybody was under his leadership, all gathered together, and then the confounding of the languages, they went out to 70 different languages, 70 different people groups, went their different ways, talking about the same guy, now with different languages. So he took on different names.
All right, pause it there, sir.
All right. But in the various...
Perfect place to pause. Perfect.
All right, so we don't have that clip that he's talking about up, but I do have the chart for that, and we're going to get into that right after this video, okay? So what he's doing is he's making an argument using scripture and his history to make his argument for Nimrod being the Antichrist here, but I want you to keep in mind what he just said. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, the man of many names, how the languages were separated at Babel, and everybody went off talking about the same guy, but in different languages, okay? So that's very important for Rob Skiba's theory, is to keep that in mind. So I just wanted to highlight that and point that out before we kept going.
Beautiful.
All right.
stories of some of these names that he became known by, you'll see that he was chopped up. Osiris was chopped up into 14 pieces, only 13 of which were found. In numerous cases, you see the mutilation of this individual. The book of Joshua tells you that Esau cut off Nimrod's head.
That's coming
Esau
next,
was
guys.
known as the mighty hunter, right? His dad loved him because he could bring home the venison, right? Remember the whole deal where Jacob fooled his dad, the whole deal with that. He was a good hunter. He was a teenager. He's about 15 years of age, I believe, 13 or 15, I forget, but I think he's 15. According to the Joshua account, he was out hunting. Nimrod's pushing about 200 and change, 230, 215, something like that, years of age. He was known as a mighty hunter. He's out there, 2 alpha dogs in the same field. Esau waits in ambush and at the opportune time rushes out and cuts off Nimrod's head and kills his other 2 buddies that were with him. Meanwhile, Nimrod had a team of other people who were further away that heard the commotion, and they came running to see what was going on, found the dead body, and wanted to know who killed Nimrod, their king. Meanwhile, Esau had taken the coats that Nimrod wore, that according to Hebraic legend were the original skins that God clothed Adam and Eve with, that were preserved on the ark and later went through Ham to Nimrod, according to the text. I think that that's where legends like in the Greek mythology of the Golden Fleece, some of these stories find their origin in possibly a real event like that. So Esau takes off running. Where does he go? He goes home. He's starving after the battle, and this mighty hunter sells his birthright for a bowl of beans. When we read Genesis, that doesn't make any sense at all. This mighty hunter comes in, sells his birthright for a bowl of beans. What? But when you realize the subtext of what's going on from the elaborated story that we get in Joshua, well, it makes perfect sense. This guy's running for his life from Nimrod's buddies because he just killed the emperor of the world. He's like, what do I care about my birthright for? I'm a dead man anyway. Just give me something to eat. Well, all of a sudden that story makes a whole lot more sense. Right? So, according to the Hebraic text, he was killed by Esau. Now, there are rabbinic legends that say that Nimrod was killed by Shem. There's a number of possibilities of what could have happened there. I basically think that what happened after Esau killed him is that Shem chopped him up into the remaining pieces that we hear about in the Osiris legend, and the pieces were mailed out to people just same way, what's it, the prostitute, I think, in the book of Judges, I think?
Yes.
Where she was chopped up and they mailed the pieces to people. They're making a statement, basically. But if you can imagine, Nimrod is the emperor of the world, right? And he's killed and nobody's there to witness. Nobody saw what really happened. How many people do you think would be trying to take credit for getting rid of this guy? Try to prop themselves up as I'm the guy. You know what I mean? So interesting. Pharaoh of Egypt at the time of Exodus, he did not have a mortal head wound. Sennacherib, no. King of Tyre, no. Antiochus Epiphanes, no. Alexander the Great, no. Domitian, no. Nero, possibly. It is said that he stabbed himself in the throat. And by the Hebraic understanding, that may be considered part of the head. Okay, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. And according to the official historical narrative, Hitler supposedly shot himself in the head. Although recent forensic evidence disputes that, they found that skull was actually a female skull, and there's no real evidence at all that showed that Hitler killed himself. In fact, there's a lot more evidence that suggests he probably got away, made his way to Argentina or someplace like that. So, but for the sake of argument, let's just say we got 3 candidates right there. Well, as we mentioned already, one of the titles used for the Antichrist throughout the Old Testament is the Assyrian. Which one fits that title? Only one. Nimrod. So by process of elimination, we've landed on Nimrod. Now, one of the names Nimrod became known by was Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, there's a number of different versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The way I look at Gilgamesh, I have a book on Sumerian myths and legends by Stephanie Daly, I think was the author, Cambridge, I think, Press. She was saying that it was understood that the Epic of Gilgamesh was a fictional story, what we might consider a blockbuster movie of the time. And a good orator, a king, if he's going on a long journey with his troops, they would hire, the local Shakespeare, somebody who could tell a good story, and they would entertain the troops, when they had their downtime. And a good narrator or a good orator knows his audience. And so they would embellish the story, maybe even include the king that he's with as part of the story, or local legends, or whatever. He would tailor the story for the various people that he was telling the story to. And so you had different versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh. So if you think of the Epic of Gilgamesh is like a blockbuster movie scenario, we could say, well, Harrison Ford is Han Solo. No, he's Indiana Jones. No, he's the President of the United States. No, he's the fugitive. Well, he's all of those things, right? One actor played many parts. So think of Gilgamesh as a fictional story in the Harrison Ford scenario, but instead of Harrison Ford, we're talking about Nimrod, right? One of the quotes from the Epic of Gilgamesh is, "Who can compare with him in kingliness? Who can say, like Gilgamesh, I am king?" Not exact, but pretty close to the same awe that people have reflected in Revelation 13. So there's a similarity there, but let's continue with this premise. Comparing Nimrod with Jesus, or Yeshua. Gilgamesh was said to be a God-man, right? We know that Yeshua is a son of man, but he's also the son of God, right? In the case of Gilgamesh, he's 1/3 man, 2/3 God. Well, 2/3 of 100 is what? 66.6%. 1/3 is what? 33.3%. 33 comes up an awful lot in occult circles and Freemasonry and secret societies, most of which the rituals go back to this guy right here. Osiris. He was one of the only other gods of antiquity besides our God, who was known as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and the pyramid texts in the Book of the Dead, etc. Osiris, Mithra, Tammuz, these are various characters whose symbol was the cross. In this case, the Ankh, which actually predates the cross. The hoop of the Ankh represents resurrection. So there's this symbology already right there of a dying individual associated with a cross who rises from the dead. In numerous depictions of the various sun gods of antiquity, he's a dying and resurrecting figure. Apollo. In the case of Apollo, he's the son of God, the son of Zeus in that case. He rules from elsewhere. We know Yeshua is in heaven, right? We're his body here on earth. His head is in heaven. He's the head of the church, as it were. He is in heaven. His body's in heaven. Our body's here. We're the body. He's the head. In the occult, it's the exact opposite. It's the antithesis. You have the Horus and those who worship on the surface, and you have the Osiris, who's the ruler of the underworld. So it's an exact opposite in that scenario. We have the name of the Antichrist, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, given for us in Scripture in Revelation 9, verse 11. 9:11. Interesting. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit. Where did the beast come from? Okay. Whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon, which is a derivative spelling of Apollo.
All right, that's good there, brother.
So it just told you who the Antichrist is.
Dude, I could listen to Rob Skiba talk all day. Not gonna lie to you.
Very, very good orator, man. Very good.
Yeah, a lot of nostalgia there, man.
Well, let's go to some of those images I sent you earlier in the email, and let's pull up. Let's go to the next one because that'll go right in line. This is from Rob Skiba, so this is the Nimrod's other names, and this is. Some people dispute these. Some of them I have a problem with, but let's just for his theory, let's go over these. So we got Gilgamesh number 1, Bel number 2, Melkart number 3, Adonis number 4, Dumazel number 5, number 6 is Dionysus, number 7 is Bacchus, number 8 is Mithra. Number 9, Orion. Number 10, Apollo. That's the big one. Number 11, Tammuz. And number 12, Osiris. Now, number 11, in some circles, Tammuz is considered to be Nimrod's child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's highly debatable. We won't get into it too much here, but I did want to point that out. Now, the big one in this list to me is Apollo for this theory, okay, because of Revelation 9:11. gives the exact name of the angel of the bottomless pit, is what it says, and it's Abaddon in the Hebrew tongue and Apollyon in the Greek tongue. Now, if you can link Nimrod to Apollo, then that answers that right there, clear cut. The problem is linking Nimrod to Apollo. It's tough to do. Now, we talked about, and I pointed this out, how at the Tower of Babel, all the languages were separated and they went their separate ways, talking about the same guy in different languages. So his name was transliterated different. And that's the crux of this theory.
Yeah.
Bronson, you want to add anything to this while we're here?
No, not necessarily. Just maybe add a little more foundation. And again, I'd always, I had such a hard problem paying attention to things growing up, and I know some of our audience is on the younger side. So, just to kind of recap on what we just talked about, there is that the entire world came together. They stood at this Tower of Babel. They were all of one language. They worshipped and built this tower. God came down. He separated them through their tongues. Nimrod, excuse me, Rob Skiba said that you had 70 different languages that were dispersed from this tower. And so everybody went away with the same story, the same history, in a different language. And so this is where we're getting some of these different names and ideas. And we're saying that there's a really good possibility that a lot of these names are pointing back to the same individual, Mr. Nimrod. So just wanted to recap there as well.
And I'd also like to point out, that when you're dealing with these different cultures and these different polytheistic religions, some of the stories are a little different, and what the gods may be over, whatever they're the god of, whether it's the sky or lightning or the water or whatever it may be, the sun and the moon, whatever. A lot of these pantheons, it's the same pantheon, just repackaged in a different culture and a different language, and it may have developed into different paths, but it seems to all have its founding in this Babylonian original kingship of Nimrod. That religion seems to come out of there. Whether you believe that all these different gods and Nephilim like Gilgamesh are just another name for Nimrod, that's neither here or there. But these pantheons, it's the same. They're talking about the same people. They're talking about real entities, in my opinion, real entities, and it's just a transliteration. And the cultures develop these differently, and they develop different doctrines as you go along. But I believe it all stems back to the same entities, just different names and different cultures. Do you want to add anything onto that idea?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm glad you asked. I've had many discussions over the years with, in particular, non-believers who have maybe spent a little more time than your average Christian looking into the different religions of the world. And I've got quite a bit of pushback on this. And so what I decided just now that would be a good reference for Christians to think of is that we can all think of 600 different denominations who are all claiming to worship the same God, the same Christ, but do it in vast amount of different ways, whether it be through a Catholic or Protestant, Methodist, whatever, but we're all claiming to worship the same God. So it's something sort of similar there, where over time, traditions change, and you might see one entity that's been split into two separate personalities or what have you. But time changes things. Traditions and language change, and superstitions change. But what I would suggest is always check on the ritualistic rites of these gods. I haven't found too much separation in the form of worship. You might find separations in the form of personality, background, creation, whatever, and names, of course. But the worship seems to be pretty static. That's fair?
Yeah, you seem to always have this theme of blood sacrifice, child sacrifice. And a lot of these rituals have carried over in the time. Like you have the 40 days of Lent, In the ancient world, that was the 40 days of weeping for Tammuz. And you have that's carried over and translated, and they make it some kind of a Christian thing within the Catholic Church. But that's where its root is in that 40 days of weeping for Tammuz. Now, with these name changes, I invite you just to go and look back at the name of Jesus and just see how much his name has changed, whether it's Yahushua, whether it's, Yeshua, Iesus. I mean, all the different names, it's still talking about the Son of God, just in different transliterations of the name.
Nicely said.
Something you can trace back and see for yourself, an example of what we're talking about here. And there is goofy stuff out there that makes connections that aren't really there. Even in this list, like Bel, I don't think that's connected to Nimrod. I could be wrong. Gilgamesh, I'm not sold on that either. There's the spiritual world, and this world of Nephilim and Rephaim. There's more than just one character, okay? And in the dark realm and in the kingdom of heaven, there's hierarchy and all kinds of angels and classes of angels, and there's a lot of them. So not all of these names link back. The key one here that I'd like our viewers to focus on, if you're going to do your own research here, would be to try and link Nimrod to Apollo. If you can do that, then Rob Skiba's theory here holds a lot of weight scripturally. If you cannot find that connection, then we got to start from the beginning and say, no, it's not Nimrod. So I invite anybody that's watching to do that. That is the important link. Is
Agreed.
Nimrod Apollo? That's the important one. Because if Nimrod is Apollo, then we have scriptural confirmation, like dead to rights confirmation, that the Antichrist will be Nimrod. Okay, so that's the big one out of this list. So I invite you guys, and please leave it in the comments, message us, whatever you want to do. We're on all platforms. Follow us on X. I check the messages on there on a daily basis. So follow us on X. If you have something good, you just want to reach out and talk to us, message us on X. We're there. We're available to talk to. We're just normal dudes. We're not far away. If you have something you want us to cover, or you have some questions on this, or if you have something you can offer to let us know, or some kind of link between Apollo, we'd love to see it. So feel free to message us on X, follow us over there. The link to the X account's right there in our homepage on YouTube. You see it right there, X, and it's Ancient Echoes 1. So hit us on X. All right, let's go to the next thing, man.
Let's do it, bro. This has been a lot of fun so far. So
before we go here, let's jump back to Jasher. There you go.
Into Jasher.
There we go.
Gotcha.
Now, Skiba almost ruined the whole video for us, man. Did you hear him?
Yeah.
I was like, come on, man, leave some of it for us. But that, I know we're going to start in 3, but let's read that verse 2 real quick. And it's getting so late, man. We might have to go through this and maybe come back around and touch some of this at another time. But let's read this verse 2, because Skiba says the man of many names, and even within these even within the scripture and in these extra biblical texts, he has multiple names. So let's read this right here, starting at verse 2.
For sure. So we're in the book of Jasher, chapter
20.
We
start at verse 1. I'm sorry. This gives that whole story he was talking about, but this will put some text in to what Rob Skiba was referencing earlier with the Esau and Nimrod.
Absolutely. Book of Jasher, chapter 27, verse 1. And Esau at that time, after the death of Abraham, frequently went in the field to hunt. And Nimrod, king of Babel, the same was Amraphel, also frequently went with his mighty men to hunt in the field, and to walk about with his men in the cool of the day. And Nimrod was observing Esau all the days, for jealousy was formed in the heart of Nimrod against Esau all the days. I wonder why. And on a certain day, Esau went in the field to hunt, and he found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with his 2 men. And all his mighty men and his people were with him in the wilderness, but they were moved at a distance from him, and they went from him in different directions to hunt. And Esau concealed for himself Nimrod, and he lurked for him in the wilderness. Jeez, he's becoming like a hunter of men. Jeez Louise. And Nimrod and his men that were with him did not know. And Nimrod and his men frequently walked out in the field at the cool of the day, and to know where his men were hunting in the field. That's pretty common hunter etiquette. Know where your buddies are so you don't start shooting arrows and accidentally hit Cain. And Nimrod and 2 of his men that were with him came to the place where they were, when Esau started suddenly from his lurking place, and drew his sword, and hastened, and ran to Nimrod, and cut off his head. So this is that mortal head wound that Rob Skiba was referring to for Nimrod. And Esau fought a desperate fight with the 2 men that were with him. And when they called out to him, Esau turned to them and smote them to death with his sword. He's got 3 bodies in one occasion. And all the mighty men of Nimrod who had left him to go to the wilderness heard the cry at a distance, and they knew the voices of those 2 men, and they ran to know the cause of it. When they found their king and the 2 men that were with him lying dead in the wilderness. And when Esau saw the mighty men of Nimrod coming at a distance, he fled, and thereby escaped. And Esau took the valuable garments of Nimrod, which Nimrod's father had bequeathed to Nimrod, and with which Nimrod prevailed over the whole land, and he ran and concealed them in his house. That is crazy. So they're finally back in what I would consider the rightful owners. These are people that probably should be in possession of these garments. It begs the question, where are they now? You got to wonder. They already lasted hundreds of years at this point. So I don't think it's too harsh of a question to ask. Are they still around? Are they still on Earth? Whose basement are they in?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think we should probably do a little bit of a deep dive on the garments of God, because there's all kinds of things you can look into in royal, like the royal coats that would appear to try and emulate these garments. You'll find as you research Nimrod and go through this that the kingships of the world all kind of base their kingship on the way Nimrod did it. He was the archetype for all royalty going forth after the flood.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then right after this is where it gets into Esau selling his birthright to Jacob and all that type of stuff. And just like Skiba said, it makes a lot more sense to why he sold his birthright here. He figured he was a dead man anyway.
Right.
And a little bit of why I think Nimrod was, the reason I think Nimrod was jealous of Esau is because Esau had his youth still.
I see.
That's the one thing you can't get, no matter how much power, no matter how much, how much money, how many women you have. What's the one thing you can't get back? Time. And Esau was a mighty hunter like he was, and I think he probably reminded him a little bit of himself, and it made him jealous. So that's one thing that I could reckon with somebody who has it all in the world. What's the one thing that would make him jealous?
Yeah,
the ability to go back and relive your youth. And you see somebody else who's coming up behind you that has a lot of the same traits. It's like, man, I remember I could do that. That type of deal. So I think that may be more or less what it was, is that he envied him for the time that he had, and for I think he saw himself in Esau and probably hated himself. Most people that have that power and that evilness and that are so haughty outwardly is to cover up that self-loathing on the inside. And wow. I think that he saw that in Esau, and whether he knew it or not, I think that triggered him to have that jealousy of her.
Wow. That's a very, very, very good idea there, man. I love that idea. It's one of the times you look at Esau, and I've never really been that guy that ever looks at the situation and thinks that, Esau got, for lack of a better term, screwed.
I'll be honest with you, I did.
A lot of people do, and I understand.
Like, God, Jacob was just such a conniving liar and just a little mama's boy. Like, yeah, like, believe me, that was my first thoughts. Like, reading it is just like, ah.
Yeah, I put it on his mom. That was always me. I was like, dude, she orchestrated that. That's my original initial reaction.
It's always felt dirty to me.
Yeah, and it does.
And it still does to this day.
There's some shisty stuff going on there, I think, but it's the way that it went down. Esau had his own hand to play in that. He sold his birthright. I'm personally of the belief currently where I stand that when you read those verses that he hated Esau or whatever and whatnot,
I personally hated Esau from the beginning, right?
Yeah, I think that's in reference. Me personally, this is a thus thinketh Bronson. Now, I've always look at that as like it's people like that who have the birthright. You have the option to receive Christ as your Lord and Savior, and then you sell it for a loaf of bread. And so that's I know there's a lot of people out there that would really disagree with that. I have a really hard time thinking that God created someone just to hate him, and that's just weird.
But that's always confounded me. And now this isn't the Esau video, and I'm sure we'll do that. As white people, we get accused of being of Esau quite a bit, even though we're from the line of Japheth and Esau's a Semite. But neither here or there, I guess. If you don't understand genealogies and who people were, I mean, you can fall for anything. That's why we've been covering so much in Genesis 10. It's very important, especially when you have people going around, oh, all white people are Esau. It's like, well, bro, most of us white people are from Japheth, including like the people in the land of Israel now. Like 92% of them are from the line of Japheth. Like they're not even Semitic, and neither are we. So we couldn't be from the line of Esau. Sorry, dude. You know what I mean? And Esau also married into the Ishmaelites, so who were Semitic also. So the people that are actually from Esau are more likely to be the Arabs, and people around the Middle Eastern areas would be much higher likelihood of being of Esau and of Edom. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. All right, so we'll finish out this chapter here, and if you want to. I'm fine to continue to record if you wanted to kind of split this here.
I'll tell you what, man. Let's just speed it up just a little bit. Now we're going to go on to another clip here, and now that what we played for you and spent a good bit of time on was Rob Skiba's theory that Nimrod was the Antichrist. Historically, though, there are a lot of theories about who Nimrod could be, whether it's, I've heard Nebuchadnezzar was actually Nimrod. I've heard that. I don't think that's true. Hammurabi, heard that a lot. And Sargon of Akkad. I've heard that a lot. I've also heard, I think it's Sargon's grandson. Sorry, the name escapes me now. It starts with an N, and I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
Napper or something like that.
It's not this one, is it?
No. That's another one. That's another one that he's said to be. But we'll get to it in a minute. I'm sure we'll find it in a moment. But let's go ahead and play this next clip. This comes from Derek Gilbert, who's another guy that we really like. Yeah. So let's play this from an interview that Derek Gilbert did with one of his guests.
Sure.
If you look at Sargon's biography, he pretty much matches up with exactly what you see going on with Nimrod, right? Nimrod starts his empire in southern Mesopotamia. And by the way, before we get to that, it's important to note that he's a descendant of Cush, right? You could spell that with a C, Derek, or you could spell that with a K. And the vowel doesn't mean anything, because most ancient languages don't even express vowels. There is a powerful kingdom in southern Mesopotamia called Kish. That is the most powerful kingdom until Sargon, right? And Sargon actually derives from or comes from the city of Kish.
That's all pretty much easily Googleable. You can look up Sargon. I did it right before we started here just to freshen up on some things. And what he's saying there is essentially true. You're talking about Kish. Sargon came from that, and you have your kingdom of was it Acadia? So it's
Well, let's go back to the email and let's pull up the Gary Wayne stuff.
sure.
I'd like to point out that a lot of people do say it's Sargon of Akkad, but in this book here, which is what you're seeing on your screen, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy by Gary Wayne, on page, I believe it's 202, you have the Nimrod chapter. Now, let's see. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Keep going. And these are all pictures I took earlier, so we could follow along.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep on going. I guess they didn't send in order.
Nice. This here starts off by saying the name Nimrod was not thought to be Hebrew.
That's it right there. Would you like me to read it, or can you
Please.
read it? Okay, there. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Excuse the sound of my pages turning. All right. The name Nimrod was not thought to be, and this is on page 204 in Gary Wayne's book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. The name Nimrod was not thought to be Hebrew in origin, but rather Akkadian. Akkad was a variant of the word city Akkad. One of the cities Nimrod was credited with founding. Akkad was the northern division of ancient Babylonia. Sometime after Nimrod, Sargon the Great of the Assyrians founded the latter imperial dynasty of Akkad. He was variantly known as the cupbearer and illustrious king, and mythos many kings tried to claim as their progenitor. Sargon's mother was oddly recorded on an inscription as a changeling. Very, very interesting. Nimrod then was the founder of the ancient Babylonians, Assyrians, and Chaldeans. Therefore, the Akkadian language from which Nimrod's name was thought to be derived fits perfectly. So what Gary Wayne is saying here is that Nimrod was before Sargon. Okay? And I tend to agree with Gary Wayne here. A lot of people try to fit Nimrod into other kings that they've found inscriptions for. But if we could go back to Jasher and look at that in that second verse there, let's go back up to number 2. And it says right there, and Nimrod, king of Babel, the same was Amraphel. Okay, now that is a name we can find in the Bible. So let's go over here to the Blue Letter Bible. Yeah, we got it right here. Awesome. This is Genesis 14:1, the War of Kings. Some people stylize this as the War of Giant Kings. And it says here in 14:1, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar. Okay, so where was the Tower of Babel built?
Shinar.
Shinar. Correct. So let's pull up the definition for Amraphel here, and let's see what kind of information it'll give us. Now, we haven't pulled this up yet, so this would be a surprise for us as well.
Yeah. H569 is your code for this. And if I can get it to scroll, we have a Sayer of Darkness. Ooh, that's kind of cool. King of Shinar, Babylon, perhaps Hammurabi. Here we go. They're really giving it to Hammurabi here.
Right. In Jasher, it says this is the same as Nimrod.
Yep.
And what does it say there? A king of Shinar, i.e. Babylonia, in the time of Abraham.
Right.
So we've already established that Abraham was around in the time of Nimrod.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, this Amraphel could be Hammurabi. Now, I don't know if you guys know anything about Hammurabi, but this is where our earliest code of law comes from. It's Hammurabi. Even some of our law, like in the British Commonwealth law and what we have in the United States, is based on the code of Hammurabi. which would make a lot of sense. So that's another thing that you guys, I would love for you guys to go and research and dig a little more into and see the connections between Hammurabi and Nimrod.
Mhm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just full on speculation here, totally throwing a shot in the dark. Um, we read that Nimrod was wicked, and from wickedness produces wicked, that his son did worse than him. Hammurabi was your guy that, we always hear that term, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that type of thing. That was a part of the code, right? On a very basic, me just kind of spitting it out here type of thing. If you got caught stealing, they'd cut off your hand type of thing. And so you have to wonder, maybe there's a chance that that was Nimrod's son, perhaps. He was more wicked than Nimrod. Again, total speculation there. But
It could be. It could be. But the thing is in Jasher, it says that Amraphel is Nimrod.
That's what it says, bro. That's what it says.
And this would be what his name was after the Tower of Babel.
Hmm.
So, and I assume after the tower fell and people dispersed, that his power was nowhere near what it was before that.
Yeah, we see that in the last little verse here. If I just scroll down right into here, it says that at the death of Nimrod, and his kingdom became divided into many divisions, and all those parts that Nimrod reigned over were restored to the respective kings of the land, who recovered them after the death of Nimrod. And all the people of the house of Nimrod were for a long time enslaved to all the other kings of the land. So if you're going to go off of what the book of Jasher says, my theory has no ground to stand on. So,
well, there's a lot of people that dispute Jasher and dispute Josephus. All we can do is just work with what we got, and it may seem like speculation, but until I have a time machine, bro, I can't do nothing but that.
absolutely.
All right, let's see what we got next, man.
Yeah, sure. So we put up the Nimrod Wikipedia page, and there's so much here. You tell me where you'd like for me to start.
Well, right here we see where it talks about Nimrod versus Abraham, and in that definition of Amraphel, he was a Babylonian king in the time of Abraham.
And I think it's sorry.
Talking about Hammurabi, most likely Hammurabi, but Joshua says that Amraphel is Nimrod, and there's some stories to go with this. We can read a little bit of this if you like, but the Nimrod versus Abraham is seems to be a theme that you have Nimrod that would be on the dark side, and then you have Abraham that was raised up by God in that same time to counteract what was going on through Nimrod's dark kingdom. I tell you, I think we have a video clip. Let's play that Facebook one up there up top. This is another one from Rob Skiba, and just talk to just about that.
Oh, no sound. But why? You just saw me press the unmute button. Why did that happen? That's so strange. It keeps on muting itself when I go to press play. All right, here we go. You're all watching me. That volume is at its peak. I'm going to press play now, and it cuts the sound out. Why does it do that? That is so strange.
God versus Abraham and a cosmic chess match. How many of you know L.A. Marzulli? You guys know L.A.? He wrote a book a while back called The Cosmic Chess Match, and I thought, what a brilliant analogy. It's like God makes a move and the devil makes a move. There's this constant move and counter move. And to me, it's most played out in the lives of Nimrod and Abraham. Now, we get a little bit of it in Genesis. You get a lot of it. You get like 200 pages worth in Joshua talking about this. Again, is it scripture? I'm not going to get into that argument. Suffice it to say, whoever ancient Jews that wrote the book of Joshua did so with a certain mindset a long time ago. Dr. Ken Johnson traces the version of Joshua that I published. He traces that one all the way back to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and where it went from there into Spain and so forth. So it at least shows, as we can look at it as Jewish commentary, how they understood the narrative, perhaps through oral tradition or what have you. So I tried to take that narrative and again depict it visually. This is the timeline chart that I created as a result of that, the Nimrod-Abraham timeline chart. Why Abraham? Why did God choose Abraham in the first place? Nimrod was in the land of Shinar, and he had essentially been made king of the world in 1948 AM, or year since creation. Interesting year. This was the same year when Abraham, or Abram at the time, was born. In fact, Nimrod's evil kingship was a big part of the reason why Yahuwah called Abram out of Ur of the Chaldees, just south of Babylon, in the first place. We read in Genesis chapter 11, "And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there." Why did they go to Haran? Well, the patron god of Ur, where they were called out of Ur of the Chaldees, was called Sin. Interesting. From our English perspective anyway. Sin was a god of the moon in Mesopotamian mythology and of Akkad, Assyria, and Babylonia. Nana is a Sumerian deity, the son of Enlil and Ninlo, and became identified with Semitic Sin. The two chief seats of Nana/Sin's worship were Ur in the south of Mesopotamia and Haran in the north. Well, we learn throughout Scripture that Terah was an idol maker. Abram's father made idols. Abram's father was an idol worshiper and one of the chief princes of Nimrod. Joshua talks about that. They served other gods, Joshua 24:2. And we see in Joshua 9:7 and 8, they elaborate on this. Now, this is an interesting story. How many of you have read the story of Abraham in his father's house with the idols? Most of you have not, it looks like. A few people have, so I'll summarize it. But, Abram, I could appreciate him. In the Joshua account, it shows that, Nimrod, he has a dream, and his interpreters basically say that Terah, the interpretation of the dream is that Terah's son is going to kill him. So he wants to go kill Abram. And so Abram ends up being taken off, and they hide him, and he ends up spending time with Shem and Noah for quite a while. And during the time that he's with Shem and Noah, the Tower of Babel situation takes place. Later, he goes back, and there's some confrontation, different things right there. Anyway, apparently, in the time that Abram had spent with Noah and Shem, he starts to realize who the one true God is, and he sees what his dad's doing with all these idols, and he's making these idols of wood and stone and whatnot. And so he starts, questioning things. So he lays out food in front of the idols to see if they eat it. And of course, they don't eat it. So, he gets frustrated to the point where he's like, you know what, this is all a fraud. So he takes a hatchet or axe of some sort, and he starts smashing all of the idols and makes a big commotion. And then he puts the axe in the hands of the biggest idol, and his dad comes in after hearing the commotion and is like, what did you do? What have you done? He's all mad. He's like, I didn't do nothing. He did. And there's the idol holding the axe, right? And Terah's like, what are you talking about? It's made of wood and stone. And, and Abram's like, yeah, hello, McFly. Why are you worshiping this thing then? That's my elaboration. He didn't say McFly. But, he's like, why are you worshiping these things? They can't eat. They're dumb. They're stupid. You yourself just said you made it. So why are you worshiping it? So basically when, Abram's call is to go to Canaan, but he ends up going to Haran because dad just picked up his idol shop from Ur to the next place where his idols would be sold. And then you see later that finally God says, okay, Abram, in case you're missing it, chapter 12, now Yahuwah had said to Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto the land I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, Abram, and curse them that curse thee, Abram, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as Yahuwah had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. Where did they go? Abram passed through the land of Canaan unto the place of Shechem. And I always wondered, why Shechem? Now, of course, he could have stopped anywhere, but that name just stuck out to me. I'm like, why did he stop there? And as we kept going through Torah portions that year, Shechem kept coming up, and it became sort of an obsession for me to figure out what is the deal with Shechem. And I came to the conclusion that Abraham was going back to the Garden of Eden. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this.
I love that story, man. I will never, ever, ever forget the first time I heard that story. I was working at a grocery store at the time, cutting fruits and vegetables for a living, and I have my headphones in listening to Jasher. And that section of the story where Abraham sits, on that cliffside and he looks at the sun and he says, "Are you the God?" And he's just so desperate. He's almost at this between grounds. And I've been there too, and I'm sure you have too, where, we've had moments in our life where we said, okay, this seems like the truth. I just wasn't raised this way, and this really seems like the right way, and you kind of battle with it for a second. You go, is this the truth? And he looks at the sun, and the sun sets, and he says, that can't be right. The moon comes up and the stars come up. He says, are you the gods? Are you who I'm supposed to worship? And then the sun rises and the stars fade and the moon sets, and he goes, this can't be it. And he makes this full decision. I get goosebumps talking about it. I'll never forget listening to that story, just going, oh my gosh. So I agree with Rob there. I just have a lot of respect. If that's the true narrative for Abram, I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, well, I encourage anybody to go read Jasher and read that whole story, because there's a lot in it that we're not covering tonight. But it is like a hero, anti-hero thing between Abraham and Nimrod, and there's a lot of similarities between Nimrod and Abraham that there was between like Herod and Jesus later on. There's a lot of foreshadowing that goes on there, and honestly, I'm really excited to get further into our Genesis commentary and get to like Abraham and just really dive into that, because Abraham was an awesome guy.
Yeah,
I mean, really awesome guy. I mean, to this day, you have religions, the three biggest religions of the world trace their heritage right back to Abraham here, who gained favor with God because he was smashing these idols, and he went and hung out with Noah and Shem. And the first time I heard that, I was blown away, like, because I didn't put that together. To me, it seemed like it was like a long time in between that, but Noah was still here. Noah lived 350 years after the flood. So he's going to hang out with Noah and Shem. And if you don't know Shem, if you hear the word Semitic, anybody that would be Semitic is from the line of Shem. So he's the Mr. Semitic. That's Shem. That's where it comes. That word Semitic comes from Shem. We've shown that in other videos from the Oxford Dictionary. That's what Semitic means. It means from the line of Shem. So that was so cool the first time I heard that. He got to go study with Noah. Bro, are you kidding me? You got to study with Noah and Shem. I mean, and then he just comes back and he leaves them there just super energized, just on fire for God. It's such a cool story. I invite you guys to go read it. I can't attest to Jasher's validity any more than I can attest to anything, but it's a very, very cool story, and it gives you a good idea of what's going on here. But I just want to take a short amount of time in this video to point out that that's kind of what's going on, that cosmic chess match where you got Nimrod rising up and building his dark kingdom, and then you have God raising up a godly man in Abraham to deal with this. Another thing it makes me think about is later on, like in 1948, when you have everything going on with World War II, the state of Israel being founded by the Rothschilds, the forming of the UN. Right there at that time, you have a shepherd boy that's throwing rocks in a cave, and then all of a sudden you hear some pottery crash, and you have all this stuff going on, the founding of this new world order with the UN and the League of Nations and all this crap going on, almost like the New Age Tower of Babel being built. Then all of a sudden, that little shepherd boy finds these documents that are ages old, and it's the Dead Sea Scrolls. And within there, you have these ancient copies of Isaiah without a single word being changed from what we have today. You have all these copies of Enoch and Genesis and all these books that they found there in Qumran. It's almost like, well, y'all are making your move, so let me give my people something. Yeah. And then bang, Book of Enoch comes back on the scene. We have confirmation that the Bible hasn't been changed, and a new boldness within the Christian community that's paying attention to counteract this new world order that's coming on the scene, that you see the fruit of it today. Doesn't the world seem like it's in a great place? But you see what's going on, and that's what it is. It's that cosmic chess match, like Skiba was referencing from L.A. Marzulli. You have that happening there in our time. and not very far. Our grandparents were alive when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
You have that happening right after that, and the same thing way back in the day. You have Nimrod and his New World Order, the Old World Order, being formed, and him being the emperor of the world, and all the darkness is going on there. And then God says, "All right, I got you," and raises up a mighty man for him and Abraham, and changes the whole face of history. And I'm sure we can go back and find several other occurrences of this, but that's the one that I can really think of that's a modern day one of the cosmic chess match that we can kind of look back and be like, man, okay, I got you. What I mean? We've talked, I know a lot of people don't like Enoch, but we talked about how Enoch, was the first thing it says. This book is not for this generation, but a remote generation that will be living in the tribulation of the end days. So you have this new world order being formed again, and then God's given us the playbook for what we need to understand for the tribulation coming right out there right after that. Well, the dark side's making this move. Here you go, guys. I've been holding on to this for 1,000 years, 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Let's get it. You know what I mean?
That's so cool, man. That is so cool.
So that's a kind of a modern day one. Well, we've covered a couple things in Enoch. Not Enoch, my apologies. We covered a couple things about Nimrod and some theories, whether he's Hammurabi or Sargon. Sorry, man. Sargon. So many names and so many different languages from different times. Yeah. But we've covered that. We've covered how Skiba's theory is that he's the Antichrist, and he's some way translated, alliterated into Apollo for the Greeks. Like I said, didn't have the time to try and break that all down. I encourage y'all to go find that out for yourself. Try and find the link. If you can't find the link, let us know. If you can, let us know. Either way, hit us up on X. Here are some other bloodlines. There's a lot of bloodlines that take their kingship back to either Nimrod or to ancient Nephilim bloodlines and the Gilgamesh, and you can follow it on down the line. Let's see. Let's pull up that just to show an example of it. Some people think that the bloodlines that come from Nimrod and that type of thing come through these bloodlines, what they call the papal bloodlines, the 13 families out of the papal states. No, I think that's further back. Yeah. Keep going to the top.
Oh.
They change their public names often to avoid us plebs catching on to the fact that they rule everything. But going back to Nimrod, the true 13 papal bloodlines. Borgia, Breakspear, Somaglia, Orsini, Contini, Conti, Chigi, Colonna, Farnese, Medici, Gittani, Vincini, Este, and Aldo Brandini. Let's look at some of these. That Conti one, man, that reminds me of the second Esdras prophecy almost.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Farnese is the one that sticks out to me. I don't know. There's just something about a horse wearing a sundress. I guess I don't know.
That's a unicorn, sir.
It is a unicorn. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, very, very cool here, man.
Look at the Aldo Brandini one. That is probably the most known. Oh, the Borgias also, but that would be something that goes with that. And I think the next post is about the same thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and this reads that the R&Rs, the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, are Orsinis. Pepe Orsini, the Grey Pope, is the patriarch in charge of their entire bloodline. They are one of the 13 papal ruling bloodlines.
It says they're in parentheses Babylonian.
They're known as the House of Orsini, and they go back to Nimrod. They have become the most powerful of the 13 bloodlines, beating out the other two most powerful, the House of Colonna and the House of Farnese, in recent decades. The Rothschilds name was created to be the public front for the banking arm of the family in order to protect the actual family and their name from public scrutiny. The French Roth means red, blood, and the shield means shield, like a shield you hold with a sword and shield. Their name literally means the blood shield or the bloodline shield, shielding the bloodline from the public. The Rockefellers, who were placed in America to take over things here, are just another arm of the same family. All Rockefellers and Rothschilds answer to Pepe Orsini. He is in control of their entire family and all their operations, and so much more, such as the Vatican and the I word, just to name a few. The DuPonts are an offshoot of another one of the 13 papal bloodlines.
Go up on the screen,
Sure.
all the way up to the top.
That's as far as it'll let me go.
This was in response to something, and it showed a picture of Pepe Orsini.
I'm going to try pressing this button and see what it says.
Okay.
Yeah? All right, that didn't work. That's all right. But here's your flags here.
Yeah, I was trying to. Maybe it's at the top of this one. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, it showed a picture of him. Man, I hate that didn't show up.
I'm sure. All right, guys, if I go missing, it's because I Googled this name. Yeah. Nowhere to be found.
I believe it's a C and not an S in Orsini. No, I was wrong. There he is.
Oh, buddy. Hey, I'm not gonna lie to you though. Those are kind of dope. Look at it, matches the jewel on the ring, and it's kind of fresh.
It says, meet Pepe Orsini, the Grey Pope, the true ruler of the world. He is of the ancient Maximus clan of Rome. That would be interesting to look into, the Maximus clan.
Mm-hmm.
He remains behind the scenes, pulling the strings of literally every secret society and every human slave in this realm. Read about your captor. That sounds like a video we did.
Yeah, yeah, it sure does, doesn't it?
There's something with these papal bloodline families, and and nobody talks about them. You always hear about the Soroses and the Rothschilds, and
Right.
even in China, the Lee family, and from the I people, the Cohens, and yeah.
Yeah, man. Absolutely incredible.
A lot of people think that this is the bloodlines that come straight from Nimrod down to these families, and that they've just been ruling the world and pulling strings from behind it. And I don't know. I don't know enough about the papal bloodlines, but I found it interesting that they tried to link it to Nimrod.
It's interesting. It's very interesting.
It's the internet, bro. You can find anything, and some things are right and some things are wrong.
Yeah.
Now, do we have anything else that we want to play? Or do you have anything else you want to point out before we close this thing out for the night?
No, I think that's about it, man. Just to kind of segue from this topic here, I mean, you've got your, you had your one world order, right, with Nimrod, and he had his kingdom, and then you have the War of the Five Kings, which we saw there in Genesis 14.
Yeah, 14 to 5. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and we'll get to that down the road. I won't bother explaining it today, but and then you see this happening again and again and again with these empires that take over the world and take over the world, and then they fall and something happens, whether it's cataclysmic or whatever. Check out our Tartaria video; it's definitely worth a watch. Ancient Kingdom Tartaria, and so you see this pattern continue and continue and continue. And it seems to me like as if these 13 families that come straight down this bloodline, it's like they just throw it at the wall, because they know eventually one day, it's going to work, right? Eventually they're going to get that Antichrist. They're going to get the beast, the image of the beast, the false prophet, and the dragon. It'll all work together. And so it's just for generations, bro, they've just been hurling it at the wall and just waiting for the day that it finally sticks. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of my take on the matter. But
a lot of people think that King Charles is the Antichrist.
I've heard. Yeah, I've heard.
And I've seen the, and I understand the reasoning for it, but I can't see anybody look at him. Who could make war with him? Like, the dude's pathetic. Like, I don't know. Just to me, I feel like the person that's going to be, or if it comes out of the bottomless pit, like, it'd be something that's just like, you'll know that this is the guy. You know what I mean? And when you look at King Charles, I just think of he just seems like an old spoiled brat that's never done anything in his life. He probably has the smoothest hands of any man that's ever lived. Speaking of hands, I don't know if you've seen it, but his hands are freakishly small.
Really?
Look at his fingers. It's haunting.
That's weird.
Yeah. We saw the picture of him with the red in the background and all that type of stuff, but I don't know about all that with him being, he's just such a ridiculous, pompous little man. I don't know. To me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. He doesn't foster any kind of like, oh man, that dude's a problem. He's, to me, it just seems like,
Yeah.
Like I said, it just seems kind of pathetic to me.
Most of them are. You look at most of these guys. Don't get me wrong; they got the drip now. They got lots of bread, and they got the nicest clothes.
They're wealthy beyond imagination. But I mean, it just like a way they carry. I could see I expect them to carry themselves more like Putin. You know what I mean? Yes. Well, I'm at. You know what I mean? Like I could see somebody with more like the characteristics of like a Putin being than Charles.
Yeah, gross. Yeah, whatever comes out of that,
I can't see anybody following that pathetic little creature. Just me, but
whatever comes out of that pit, though, man, it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, we really could do at least another segment because we didn't get into some of the emails from a certain lady who talks about Gilgamesh and finding these giant bodies and. There's so much still behind some of this.
We could just do a whole thing on the when we first went into Iraq, the U.S. Army and the museum there in Baghdad. There's a lot there. There's a lot on Nimrod that we didn't get to. Like
so much.
Go check it out. Look for whatever you can find. There's all kinds of lore about him. Me personally, the only thing I can say about the Antichrist is it's going to be Apollo.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Whether Nimrod's Apollo or not, it's going to be Apollo. The one thing that makes me think it's not Nimrod is it says the angel. I don't believe that Nimrod, no matter what, changed into an angel. So that's kind of where I get stuck on it. There is the angel, the bottomless pit, and so I suspect Apollo is probably one of the fallen angels, of course, but probably one of the angels put over one of the nations.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But that's even debatable. But it's going to be Apollo. That's one thing that's not. Mm-hmm. Nimrod was definitely the archetype for all of the kingships going after him.
Yeah,
definitely the archetype.
It was an extraordinary human being, man. I mean, we see the rise and the fall of the first great king, the king of the world, the archetype, like you say he is. And I think we can learn a lot from that as Christians, man. Just seeing the strategy that he took, seeing that there are a lot of similarities to what you see in Revelation and in Daniel. And there's just this episode was really, really fun to do, man. There's a lot that you can glean from this because it touches on everything. We're talking about supernatural garments that give people practically powers. We're talking about Esau hiding in the bushes, coming up and getting a hold of them. Asher and giants and Osiris, Horus, and Set. History and geography. I mean, this episode here is a real good taste of just what Ancient Echoes likes to do,
Yeah, I mean, this this type of like if we wouldn't discover this topic 12, 13 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. This is one of the things that set us on a path. It's hard to tell things for sure, but what we do know is that it seems like Nimrod started off, worshiping God, building the altars and sacrificing, and then as time went on, we've talked about it several times, power corrupts. And it's almost like he took the same type of route, not exact, but type of route that Solomon took.
Mm.
He started out in the graces of God and searching for God for wisdom, like Nimrod, God granted Nimrod the victory and, blessed Nimrod and all that type of stuff at first, but then it got corrupted as he went along. And by the end of it, he was an embodiment of corruption and wanted to kill God. Now, Solomon didn't go that far, but Solomon did do a lot of other things and interacting with the spiritual realm. I think we're going to do a part 2 on this. Let's do a part 2 on this. So we can cover Amraphel, Imrakar, the stones from Imrakar to the Lord of Arada, some of the other theories on it, but we've talked about it. Some people think Sargon of Akkad, some people think Hammurabi, some people think he's just the Antichrist. So we could we'll do a part 2 on it. Maybe we'll do it next week. Maybe we'll give it a break and then circle back to it. But we'll definitely get back to it, and I'll put it in the community post and I'll put it on X. After we do our commentary to see where we're at, we still have to do the Canaanites, which play a big role in the ancient world and a big role in the Old Testament. Just to get a good idea of that, and so that's going to be a whole lot of more giants and hybrids, and it's going to be crazy, guys. So that's something we got to touch on before we get out of Genesis 10, and answer a few questions there, and go through some of those names and see where they come from. And there's, we covered a lot of it in our Nephilim video. We didn't get it all. There's a lot there, so we'll cover just the Canaanite tribes coming up. But I mean, right now we're looking at 2:17 a.m. Man, we got to get up bright and early in the morning. So we're gonna go ahead and close this out now. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Share this out to whoever would be interested in it. And please follow us on X. There you can message us directly. Sometimes we read the comments, and most of the time we do, but sometimes we both work 2 jobs. We said it before. We're super busy with families and doing this and that, and it's summertime and people wanting to travel, and it's it gets crazy. So if you want to contact us, if you want to talk to us, follow us on X and direct message us there. One of us will get back to you. We'll answer your questions, and if you have something cool, we'll talk back and forth and try and fit it into the show. And most of the time, if you're talking about the subject that we're on, we're probably going to do it anyway. So if you have something to add, you find a connection between Apollo and Nimrod, whatever, you just want to reach out and talk to us, man. If you need prayer, if you need, just reach out. We're here. So that's the best way, and really the only way I think that we have right now to reach out and talk to us. So follow us on X. Make sure you follow us on X and shoot us a message on there. But for me, I love you guys on the other side of the screen. Hope this, unlock some new mysteries for you guys to go and dig into. I know it did for me when I first heard it. So, go check out Nimrod, get into that Old Testament that you don't want to read most of the time, and just get in there, because not all, but a lot of the good stuff in the Bible is right here in Genesis. And right here at the very beginning is, civilization starting to reform after that flood. So I love you guys. And for me, God bless you. And thanks for watching.
Man, that's awesome. Austin, bro, it is always a pleasure. And we will see you guys next time on Ancient Echoes.